Hi everyone, Bernardo here. Do you know what cognitive bias is? This concept was disseminated roughly 50 years ago by Dendrix and Kahneman. Today, I'll be exploring how some cognitive traps influence the way we perceive and experience the services. The Wikipedia entry for cognitive biases has 125 different traps that you can unwittingly fall into. It is quite counterintuitive that we evolved to inherit such flaws, but to me, the fascinating aspect of understanding such biases is the fact that, yes, we are wired to make mistakes, but the way we make mistakes is in a systematic way. According to Kahneman, a rather common cognitive trap is the confusion between experience and memory. In other words, the difference between being happy in the experience and being happy about the experience. A last-minute flop can feel like ruining the whole experience. It actually doesn't. It ruins the memory that you have about that particular time. Then Kahneman, through his research, asserts that we think of ourselves as two selves. The experiencing self, in one side, which lives in the present, right now, and on the other side, the remembering self, which lives within memories, is the one who keeps score and is the storyteller of our lives. In his research, Dan brings up a classic psychology study that was conducted in the 90s. This research was run with 150 patients that had to undergo a colonoscopy, which back in the time was a rather unpleasant experience. During the procedure, they were reporting their pain levels, and as you can see, patient B reported much more intense and long-lasting pain than patient A. However, when asked to rate their experience, patients defined their experience based on two major points of their procedure: the most painful moment and the final moments of the colonoscopy. Based on these findings, a patient would much rather undergo a procedure similar to what patient B was subject instead of preferring what patient A had. I've recently read a fantastic article by Arledge where he brings up all these aspects to the world of service design. He summarizes 4 topics that can optimize the service you're providing, which are, first of all, don't screw up the ending. Most people are aware of the anchoring effect that a good or bad beginning can have. Unfortunately, good endings are often overlooked. Good endings in the digital age include experiences such as finding related articles as soon as you finish a good read instead of finding clickbaits, and this also hold true to situations like unsubscribing from a mailing list. The second point is slow down. There is a cognitive bias called duration neglect. When recording a good service, people tend to focus on key moments, such as pivotal point and change on the plot. This being said, you might have more time to play around than you think. Slow down when possible. For instance, people like to remunerate service workers based on their perceived value. If you hire a contractor like a plumber or a locksmith that does their job extremely quick, you might feel that you have overpaid them. The third point is to create peak moments. Having a holistic approach is fundamental. Being able to see the big picture and allowing people to discover something huge within their own pace, it's phenomenal. It's like attending a great class from a teacher that leads you to your own insights and discoveries. Kurt states that experiences without high points are vulnerable to unexpected problems. If they're all too blunt and stable, it just takes a tiny dent or a low point to ruin the whole thing. In contrast, an experience with an emotional high point and an emotional high peak at the end is much more resilient to problems. In theory, one single great high point can override an otherwise disastrous experience. It is much better to have a service or product that goes through some low points but ends up after high peak than having a blunt and stable service that might even be dented by a low unexpected situation. And last but not least, be a story designer. There are very straightforward formulas to really good stories out there. Character A meets character B, character A gets increasingly well, and something happens that drags character A down to a down point. Then there's a plot twist, maybe even a deus ex machina, and character A goes back way up high. From Carl Jung archetypes to Kurt Vonnegut shapes of stories, there are a lot of good formulas out there. As Kurt describes, most Disney stories can be broken down to 5 steps, with a peak and a high ending, even though it goes through some low points. When we are remembering something, different parts of our brain, such as the hippocampus, amygdala, and prefrontal cortex, are firing up as we recall those aspects. It's more like a live concert playing inside our head instead of a movie or a video clip of something. We are always reconstructing our episodic memories. Thank you so much for joining this week. I'd love to hear about problems that you're facing right now that could apply such a framework. Feel free to connect with me, drop me a comment or send me a message. And as always, all of the references can be found in the comments down here. See you next week.